Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest in our webinar series. So we aim to help researchers and practitioners share knowledge and experience in natural flood management. And today we're very pleased that we've got Jess Fox, Dr. Jessica Fox, who works at Hull City Council in flooding, and she's going to present on working with natural processes in lowland environments, modelling, mapping and evaluating. Just before we start, a couple of quick housekeeping things to cover, and but I'm Gerard Stewart, by the way. I'm the communications coordinator for the natural research the Natural Flood Management Research Programme. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. In terms of housekeeping, your microphone should be muted when you join the meeting. Please keep them muted so that we don't have background noise. If you do have questions, please do ask questions. Please use the chat function, the little speech bubble option there. Oh, some people are saying they've got no sound. Can you still hear me okay, Jess? A couple of people have sent a message saying they've got no sound.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, yes.
Maybe it's people to check the laptop.
Okay, somebody they can hear now. Good. Okay, yeah. Good. Right. Thanks both of you for letting me know you can hear now. Good. Yeah, so yeah, please do ask questions. We in previous webinars we've had some quite lively discussions going on during the webinar. So if you see a point that somebody's made and you think you can respond, please do that. That's great. We are recording this webinar and it will be made available on our website, hopefully later today, if not tomorrow. So I'm just going to briefly explain the research program before I hand over to Jess. It's a 4-year NERC funded program, £4 million worth of research, and we're carrying out novel science to improve the understanding of NFM where possible, including quantification. We're looking at a range of NFM measures in different types of catchments, flooding scenarios and at different scales. And overall we aim to improve evidence and understanding for policymakers and practitioners. Partnership working is absolutely critical to the success of the research program, and there's a quick summary there of all the or the logos of all of our chief partners.
And just press the submit button.
Okay, and sorry, I heard somebody on the line there. Today,
stay, Andrew. Are you going to catch up with Becky, I think Chris as well, then, just around the upload of stuff into Paps, or is that going to happen?
Somebody speaking. I don't know if anyone can identify who that is. Send them a message.
Somebody has to press the submit button, and it's just remembering before I go on holiday that I also ask somebody to press the button.
Okay.
I'm happy to press all the buttons. I want shape files. I don't want anyone to.
Okay, well, I'll try and carry on. Sorry about the noise. If somebody could try and see who that is speaking.
Andrew.
Thank you, Becky. So maybe you get that
satisfaction.
I know who it is. I'll give him a call.
Oh, okay, thanks, Jeff. Unless he's on the phone already, of course.
I'll text him.
Thank you.
And then just on other point, Andrew, about the living with water type stuff and the Yorkshire water stuff in Hull. Is your intention to get that meeting done and then get all those transferred or updated back into Paps, or is this something that's going to happen further down the line?
I've just sent him a message.
First one, I don't think it's a big piece of work. It's just 4/5 projects, for an existing one, new one, just get the basic data into Paths. But I think the basic data's nearly there.
Can you?
Right, okay.
Who is it, Jess? I can probably mute the microphone if I can know their name.
It's
Dean conversation with East Riding Hull
and Andrew
Water for some numbers, which they're working on now. And
I've just sent them a message on here as well.
Aha, right, great.
There we go. Hopefully they've seen the message.
Great. Right, where was I? Yeah, so Jess isn't actually part of the research program as such, but we're keen to provide a platform for partners who are working in this area and to enable the sharing of experience and the building of understanding. Right, now without further ado, I'll hand over to Jess.
Fab, thank you. I'll just share my screen. This one. Share. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Can you see that, Gerard?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fab. So thank you very much for joining me, and it's a very, very sunny lunchtime. So hopefully I'll get to enjoy some sun after this. So I'm going to talk about a project that I've been managing for the last 2 years, based in Hull and East Yorkshire.
And I'll include you still so that you can still dial in throughout any transition.
Dean again. There we go. It's muted. That's fine. So if I carry on here. There we go. So this is a massive partnership project. So there's a lot of people who deserve credit for this, because it has taken a lot of different organisations and a lot of different people to put into this. So this is just a list of the key project partners, and just to mention to the Environment Agency for funding this project. And our consultants were Arram, and our sub-consultants were the Energy and Environment Institute at the University of Hull. So this is what I'm going to kind of try and run through in the next half an hour or so. But if I run out of time or you want to come back and revisit any of this, what I've done is I've kind of hyperlinked all of these so that you can navigate the presentation at your own leisure once this is put up onto the website afterwards. So just an overview of the project. So what we aimed to do at the very start of the project was to provide an evidence base to demonstrate the extent to which NFM measures could reduce and attenuate peak flows along the River Hull. Now, Hull has the highest flood risk outside of London, and we are at risk of every type of flood risk, which makes our job really, really, really fun. So that's groundwater, fluvial, tidal, groundwater, sewer, surface water. So that makes it really fun. So we are constantly having to come up with innovative ways to try and reduce our flood risk so that the people that live here, work here, visit here are all at minimal risk. So if we have a little look at our catchments, so on the left there, there's an elevation map of the UK. And as you can see, we're part of the eastern side of England, which is very, very low. Now, historically, this catchment was marshland. You can see the map on the right-hand side. So the River Hull has been around for a long time, and originally was characterised by the main channel. Can you see my mouse? Hopefully you can see my mouse. The main channel coming down here, and then another channel on the eastern side there as well. Now, this area has been drained historically very extensively, like many lowland areas, so that the land could be used for agriculture. So we have a lot of water moving through the River Hull catchment, and it has to travel from all the way up here, all the way down, and discharge via Hull into the Humber estuary. So the River Hull is sourced up here, up near Driffield, and it's groundwater fed. And we have the most northerly chalk streams in England up here. They're very, very nice. Now, the problem we have down in Hull is that we lie below the high tide watermark, and we are reliant on flood infrastructure such as the tidal surge barrier, flood walls, and large water storage areas on the western side of the city to try and catch the rainfall as it travels through Hull and try and avoid what happened in 2007 when we had the really bad surface water flooding then. Now, one of our other issues is that twice a day our watercourses are tidally locked, which means we can't discharge twice a day. Now, when we have heavy rainfall further upstream, this causes a problem down in Hull as well. So we're a very flat area and we have 100% reliance on pumping. Now, if we look at this map on the right-hand side, this just shows you the main rivers identified by the Environment Agency. So down in Hull, you can see that there's some random blue lines that aren't connected, and that's just because the ownership and responsibility of these watercourses are shared between the council and the Environment Agency. But if we just have a little look up here, you can see we've got the main channel, main River Hull channel here, and we refer to this as the high level system. And this is raised above its floodplain, and there's minimal connection between the River Hull and its floodplain, and it's protected by levees. Now, the lower system are the man-made straightened channels. You can see there's one just there, another one down here, another one running along the eastern side as well. Now, the two systems, the high level and the low level system, have minimal interactions with each other, and there are some very large pumps along the River Hull and the two main drains on the western and the eastern side of the River Hull, which try and kick in and move water when it's needed. So the rationale behind this study, a few years ago, back in 2015, a strategy was drawn up. That was a partnership project as well. Now, if we just quickly go back to this map, and you can see the orange here basically represents Hull City Council's boundaries. And then we are surrounded by East Riding of Yorkshire Council. So it was realised a few years ago by the flood risk management teams back then that obviously water doesn't care for political boundaries. It just wants to discharge and find the path of least resistance. Back in 2015, a joint strategy was created, and a lot of modelling was done for that, and a lot of shortlisted options were suggested, which you can see in the table there, and upland natural attenuation was one of those. So the idea was to slow the flow of water through the catchment and to store water in upland areas if we can. So for the purposes of this project, the catchment was characterised by different typologies, and this is necessary when determining what type of NFM feature is suitable and which ones aren't. So the NFM in different typologies was also identified as one of the gaps in understanding of the Environment Agency's Working with Natural Processes Evidence Directory. So in the River Hull catchment, we identified 4 broad typologies. In the upper catchment, in the green, we have what we're calling the upper catchment typology, and this is characterised by being influenced by underlying chalk bedrock and being groundwater fed up there. The middle catchment typology, which is the orangey colour, that's where the gradient drops a little bit, and the tributaries, headwaters drain towards the River Hull, and it's still influenced by chalk bedrock there. The big blue section we have identified as lowland catchment, and this is very flat, barely any gradient at all, and has been extensively drained. It's mostly pumped, with floodplains disconnected from the River Hull, and here it's underlain by permeable clay on chalk bedrock. And then the yellowy colour at the bottom shows the urbanised areas. So down here we've got Hull, and then up here we've got the town of Beverley. Now, for this work, we haven't gone into detail in the urbanised area, but if anybody is interested in hearing about the floods or the NFM within the city, then get in touch afterwards. So just remember that throughout this, I'm going to refer to upper catchment.
Just sorry to interrupt. I'm going to mute all participants. Then, if you could turn your mic on again, that should.
Yeah.
It's just you, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you again now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Interrupt.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Let me put this back in. So even though I'm mentioning upper catchments, I am talking about a minimalistic gradient change. So this is all a really lowland area. But as you can see from the map, the highest land is on the western side, and so the flow of water generally comes from the west and drains to the south. So why are we looking at NFM now? So there is a £200 million programme of investment, Environment Agency investment, being put into flood infrastructure in our region, using, you might have heard of the Humber Hull frontages and other large schemes. And these are critical infrastructure to protect our city. However, given the threat of climate change in the Humber region, well, absolutely everywhere, we do need to think outside the box and try and integrate more natural solutions in as well, to enable a sustainable future for us all and for people yet to come. So I have pinched this image from the Environment Agency's Working with Natural Processes roadshow. I really liked it. I think it's really good at showing that clearly that amount of water cannot fit in its channel, and the water is going to keep on coming. So what we can do is, instead of trying to push it all and squeeze it into the channel, we can create semi-natural pathways for the water to flow in during peak times that have the greatest environmental benefit but the least risk and the least effect on human life. So again, I've taken this image out of the Environment Agency's Working with Natural Process Evidence Directory, and I've adapted it for this study basically. So I've changed it into our typologies, and then the measures that are listed there are the ones that we identified as being useful in our area. So this isn't necessarily the same for every area, but for our gradients or lack of gradients, this is what we found most appropriate. So we started off this study with a desk-based study. That's what this bit here is. And we decided which measures were most suitable based on the physical characteristics of each typology, the underlying geology, and then data sets such as the Working with Natural Processes spatial data sets, the Natural Receptor Database, and others. So once we chose a list of most suitable NFM measures for this area, we needed to refine which measures we were going to model in more detail and in which sub-catchments, because we couldn't afford to test them all. So what we can see here is a map of the catchment. So on the right hand side here is our typology map, and this map on the left shows how we have broken the catchment up based on the models that we have available. So the blue here represents the model that was created and used for the River Hull integrated catchment strategy that I mentioned a few slides ago. And the red outlines show the upper sub-catchments that feed into the River Hull catchment. And there's 14 of these, and they're quite, some of them are quite large. So you can understand that we couldn't model them all, so we had to choose the most suitable sub-catchments. So the existing RICS model we'll come to shortly, but for the next few sections I'm going to focus on modelling of the upper sub-catchments out here. So what we did is, to get an idea of the catchment's response to rainfall and existing flow patterns, we modelled the response of runoff based on changing land use by reforestation at different percentages. So we did it at increments of 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%. And we did this for a 1% annual exceedance probability rainfall event. So these hydrographs, I won't show you them all because there's lots. I'll just show you a few as an example. The hydrograph on the left shows the baseline is when there's no NFM intervention there. It's just what we expect to be happening naturally. And then all the different coloured lines show the different percentages of reforestation. Now in the Herne catchment on the left, we're actually seeing an increase in the peak, even though the time to the peak has been delayed by 15 minutes. The peak is actually larger and there's two peaks, so that's not the most ideal catchment to be looking at. And then on the right hand side, the Arram sub-catchment, we've got quite a time lag to reach the peak, and a slight reduction in discharge there as well. Here we've got the Watton sub-catchment, and here we've got a delay of about 30 minutes. There's two peaks here, but they are both delayed. Now, one of the things that we had to bear in mind, but we couldn't factor into the modelling for this study, was groundwater flooding as well. With these subcatchments being groundwater fed and influenced by the chalk, naturally this could work both ways. It could work really well in the terms of the if it's being dry, then the chalk can take in a lot of water to start with before any water actually flows into any of the runoff pathways. Or if there is an extensive flood event and the chalk gets pretty full, and then we get some groundwater flooding as well as surface water flooding, then these peaks could happen at the same time, or they could just have a negative effect. So that was something that we did bear in mind, but we couldn't model as part of this study. Then on the right hand side, we've got another hydrograph showing quite a big reduction in peak flow and a time lag as well. So some of the limitations to this stage 1 modelling was that because we're using 2 different models, the modelling from the stage 1 modelling is likely to feed into the RICS model when we come to that as well. It doesn't take into account groundwater and infiltration hydro processes, but because as many lowland modified catchments are, because it's so complicated, we felt like the simplest approach was the best. This way we feel that the benefits that we identify in this study are probably underrepresented. Like we expect the actual benefits to be much more. So yeah, we do expect them to be much more, and the chalk again is a massive part of that, but could work both ways. So what we did was, based on those hydrographs and what we had learned from the desktop study, and bearing in mind the limitations to the modelling capabilities, we chose the highlighted sub-catchments to take through to further in-depth modelling. So we've got the Watton catchment here, which I showed you the hydrograph for. Now here we bunched together 4 sub-catchments and turned it into one large catchment. It's a bit cheeky, but it worked well. And then what we've also got is we've got a site here which is within the pumped area, which we modelled in isolation as well. So I'll show you that one as well. Now the benefits of choosing these sites was that they showed the highest potential in the hydrographs, and they are less groundwater dominated than the sites to the north and the east. And because this study was funded by FDGIA, there was an emphasis on trying to provide an evidence base specific for FDGIA partnership funding rules. And so luckily here we have Beverley round about here, and then obviously Hull down here as well, to be able to potentially relate properties to be able to justify funding going forward. So once we identified our upper sub-catchments that we wanted to model in detail, we refined the NFM measures down again and chose 7. What we did was we went out for 3 very lovely summer sunny days, and we had a little look at all of the runoff pathways and the channels and the existing land cover to see how practical these would be. So the NFM measures that we've chosen and the sub-catchments that we've chosen aren't just based on computer work. We did go out, and hopefully they're fairly practical as well. So the next part of the modelling, what we did was we used Caesar List Flood Landscape Evolution Model, which is open source, and you can get to it using the link here. We tested each shortlisted NFM measure individually within the sub-catchments, and then all the measures together, and these created more hydrographs, and we calculated the difference in peak flow and the time to peak, and we ran these for 2 scenarios. We did it for a 10% annual exceedance probability, which is the kind of event we would expect NFM to have an impact on, but we also did it for a long duration event, as a 3-day storm event as well. So here for the Watton sub-catchment, we can see which interventions here we've got. So if you remember the typology map, these sub-catchments are actually going over different typologies. So we modelled them separately to take that into account. So we've got the leaky dams are showing the highest potential, as well as the floodplain reconnection in terms of peak reduction. They're all showing a decent delay to the peak, but the floodplain reconnection and the wet woodland show the greatest. I just wanted to highlight actually that the leaky dams that I talk about here are not your typical upland in-channel leaky dams. These are actually more field earth bunds, which are far more practical up here, or should I say down here in our lowland. So for the Arram sub-catchment, so we used the 4 Arram sub-catchments and we bunched them all together. So basically this is the hydrograph for one of those. And you can see, again, we've got a 9% reduction in peak flow and a time delay of 300 minutes, which is quite massive as well. So, and that's just for one of this Arram sub-catchments. So we've got another 3 of those, but I didn't think we'd have time to go through them all. So I've just chosen this one. But it's important to note that the collective measurements, they're not just the values in here added up. We actually ran it as a full simulation so that all of the measures are interacting with each other. So it's more practical. So from all of these, all the work we did so far up to this point, we created these lovely opportunity maps. So what you can see here is the outline of our sub-catchment. It's got an OS background on the back, so it's really easy to identify key points and where everything is. It looks pretty busy because it's showing the runoff streams and the stream orders as well as our 7 NFM measures. So as you can see, some of these leaky dams, like I mentioned, are along fields, but they are following natural pathways. So there's clearly something here that's causing the water to flow down here anyway. So I don't think it would be too much of an inconvenience to implement something here to kind of capture it a bit better, capture the water a bit better and the soil as well. So here, if we take a little snapshot of this map, which is just this section here, have a look at it on Google Maps, you can see that the ploughing regime at the moment is going straight down into our main runoff pathway, which is just here. There's an existing bit of woodland here, and yet on both sides of this runoff stream, there is areas of agricultural land on either side, with the direction of plough going straight into the runoff. So this will contribute towards obviously soil and water runoff during rainfall, and there's no kind of interventions or no barriers at all, and minimal infiltration of water into the soil. So there'll be a lot of soil that's coming off of these fields and going into the streams as well. So if we were to implement contour ploughing, which is suggested in the opportunity map up here, and change the direction of ploughing, then it could increase, it probably is very likely to increase the water infiltration into the soil to reduce how much water is getting to the runoff pathway. It would also contribute towards soil health and keeping soil within the land as well. And there's lots and lots of benefits related to soil management and health and climate wider benefits, carbon capture, and there's very little risk of tipping over if you contour plough these areas. I know it's a risk in some upland areas, but it's not really an issue here. So this is the 4 Arram sub-catchments that I mentioned. Now, this map looks really busy and could look quite scary to somebody if you presented this to a landowner perhaps, but some of these measures are tiny, and not all of them are measures, obviously, because you've got the stream orders and the runoff here as well. And it looks like there's a lot of leaky dams, but again, it's just working with what's already happening in the landscape, and these measures could significantly improve it for the landowners themselves, tenant farmers, and just the general health of the environment all around. So we wanted to model a pumped area because the upper catchments that we focused on previously were out of the pumped regime. So here we had a site which Natural England led on a project of turning some farmland into a wetland. So it's this area of land is currently in a stewardship agreement, and it really wants to increase its land management practices after the agreement's up. So the parcel of land that we're looking at here, it's hydrologically isolated from the surrounding land, through ring ditches and sluices. And this is to maintain water levels within this red boundary here, which is part of the wetland. And it's to maintain high water levels throughout the year. So the site has been, it was turned into a wetland to maximise like land use, because there was unproductive sections of land. But the project has helped save on the big costs. So in moderate rainfall events, this wetland is more efficient than running big pumps to try and move water. So the pump allows the land manager to manage the wetland grazing parcels, and there are still agricultural sections on here which work together with the land around. So there has been positive interest in expanding this wetland area to try and take into account more water. So up here we've got Leven Canal, which is a triple SI, and then we've got some pumps located up here. Now there's two large pumps which pump water into the River Hull, and then there is a smaller pump which redirects water and basically creates like a circular loop to try and keep water on site rather than sending it into the River Hull and downstream. And what we found was we ran a model, again using Caesar list flood, and we recreated the flooding in 2007 because it was the most data that we had available to be able to calibrate the model. And we found that if the pump was installed back in 2007, which it wasn't, if it was, then the small pump could have gone online for about 29 hours before the larger electric pumps came on to start pumping water into the River Hull. So those 29 hours are quite critical when you're talking about moving a large volume of water downstream. Now, if anybody's more interested in the wetland project, there is a video link here, and that'll tell you all about that project. So what effect does implementing NFM have in further downstream in the River Hull itself, and does this extend to Kingston upon Hull? And I've just realised I've already drank all my Dr. Pepper, so I can't have a sip. Maybe you can all have a sip for me. So here we are now using model number 2, which is the RICS model. Okay, so we didn't create this model, and the consultants that worked on the River Hull integrated catchment strategy, they came up with this model. It was an integrated model which takes into account lots of different functions like groundwater, tidal, but we decided to use the fluvial only version, again to try and keep it simpler rather than make it more complicated. But this map here shows our chosen upper sub-catchments that we modelled, and then the inflow, RICS inflow points here. So basically we generated discharge values from these model runs, and we fed them into the RICS model, and these are the locations where we inputted them into RICS, and we was able to run the RICS model and then determine the flow to see if NFM had any effect or not. Now, if anybody's interested in the technical reports for this side of the modelling, it's all available in the full project report. I'll share the link afterwards, and you can download it all from there. For the RICS model, we ran a 1%, 2% and 10% annual exceedance probability rainfall events. And we modelled all of the NFM interventions together and the leaky dams scenario in the upper and middle catchment typologies. So for this modelling, we didn't model all 7 NFM measures individually. We did them all together, and then just the leaky dam ones on their own. Now, what we're seeing is that between points 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, there is barely any hydrological benefit further downstream. Now, this could be because of the way that the RICS model is set up. It's set up for long duration events and was more suitable for the hard engineering schemes rather than NFM. It could be because of the tidal influence. There's a lot of reasons why we're probably not seeing any benefits down here, but from the modelling beforehand, we did see that the localised benefits were really good. So here again, that's the same. So what we needed to do after we ran the RICS model was to try and do a cost benefit analysis to try and determine if there were any properties that would benefit from NFM downstream. And so for this, we did some flood depth mapping. So if this is you can see the river hull down here, you can see the areas, the flood depths of areas that are flooding, and then we've got some yellow blobs here and there, which show properties which could be used to justify funding. Now, unfortunately, because this is a predominantly agricultural area, we only identified about 3 properties that could benefit from the NFM. But again, this strings back to limitations in the modelling, and the fact that it's an agricultural area. So it doesn't mean that NFM isn't working. It just means that based on funding rules, it may not be justified. So what we found from everything that we've done so far was that the benefits were not only flood related, but were mainly environmental and ecosystem service orientated. There was a benefit to some homes, just not many. Now, when I wrote this slide, it was before the new FDGIA partnership funding guidance was released. So I haven't updated this since then because I haven't read through it all yet. But it is likely that this NFM project, as well as others, would score higher on the partnership funding calculator now. But in the report, we did identify several other funding sources that could be used to go alongside Environment Agency funding as well. So once we'd realised that it was unlikely we was going to get any FDGIA funding for this, I didn't want to just kind of give up, print the report and stick it on a shelf. So as a team, we all came up with the idea of creating an evaluation matrix. So this is what went into our matrix. So we've got flood risk benefits, we've got land use, funding and future maintenance, and ecosystem service benefits. Now, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate, that projects are all controlled by money, and so the funding opportunities that are around and what the funders want sometimes do define how projects turn out. And now that we know that, well, I think it's kind of been known for a while that flooding is not necessarily always the biggest beneficiary of NFM, but working with natural processes in general can give out really good results. So what we did was we collated as many official sources of information as possible, but based some of this information on informal communications between us and landowners, and we came up with a scoring matrix. So basically, each score of these 4 criteria can be altered to have a different weighting, and have a screenshot. This is a screenshot of the matrix of what it looks like. So we have this matrix available for both upper sub-catchments that we worked on in this project. So the tool is aimed to help with both the bottom down and the top down approach. So it could be helpful if you know what your desired outcome is, whether that's based on funding or opportunities available. Then this could help justify or determine which NFM measure would give you the biggest benefit. So it's been developed to allow those working on NFM projects to prioritise interventions throughout large catchment areas. So each intervention is weighted based on several sub-criteria, and to identify the highest ranking NFM opportunities with theoretically the greatest potential to yield success in an NFM project. So it's also designed to help identify relevant funding sources based on the greatest benefits likely to be achieved. For the River Hull catchment, it's been useful to help determine other factors worth considering aside from flood risk benefit alone. And this raises the profile of wet woodland and tree planting opportunities due to the ecosystem services provided by these forms of intervention. So basically I'll just explain like what everything is on the matrix. So up here we have an interactive map. and you can turn on and off different interventions. So the keys down there, so you can see what is being shown, and you can also click on each individual measure, and it'll tell you its location and a few more details. Down here, this is where you decide your weightings. So basically there's 4 little sliders here, or you can input your percentages there to change. So basically when we ran this matrix for the Watton sub-catchment, if we increase the hydrological benefits and decrease the ecosystem services, we found that leaky dams were the scored the highest. But if we turned the hydrological benefits of the modelling down and turned the ecosystem services up, then tree planting and wet woodland scored the highest. So up here we have an average score by intervention type, and again you can click on these and it will show you where they are on the map. And then down here we have a list in the form of a table which shows you individual scores, individual measures, and the locations of them. And again, you can click on these and it'll show you where it is on the map. So this will hopefully aid future NFM projects and cut down time on feasibility studies, because technically this did that. So I'm conscious of time. So recommendations. So I've come up with some recommendations to be able to implement this project up here in the River Hull area, and that's to consult opportunity maps when planning any works in the Watton or Arram sub-catchments, to influence landowners to consider these leaky bunds or in the fields of corner, or the corners of fields based on locations on the map. So here you can just see a little image of how a field leaky dam could help in an area. We've got to use the NFM evaluation matrix to aid decision-making processes. And then we've got the Living with Water partnership as well to engage and promote benefits of NFM, the wider benefits of NFM in the River Hull Valley, and the new Yorkshire Flood Resilience Pathfinder project as well, to try and explore NFM measures that way as well. Now, looking wider, we are hoping to make the NFM evaluation matrix available online, open source, completely free to use. Now, once this link is available, and I'll share it with everybody, if anybody uses it, could you let me know what you've used it for, how you've used it, and if you've come across any pros or cons, because this is such a new thing. We'd like to be able to work on it if need be. There is a national water management in lowland catchments working group as well. Steve Rose kindly said I could name him on here if anybody has any questions about that group. But there is a link here to the website for the group, and it's got the presentations and previous meeting minutes on there if anybody's interested in finding out what that group's up to. And I'm hoping that this study may fill in some gaps in our knowledge and hopefully lead on to more NFM in lowland areas, and I know that's very different to upland areas, so hopefully it will build on that as well. So here is just a very simple, what have I been talking about for the last half an hour. And so the most suitable NFM measures for the River Hull Valley we identified to be leaky field dams, large woody debris in channel, floodplain reconnection, wet woodland, buffer strips, contour ploughing, and tree planting. And that when we modelled the flood risk benefits using the 1 in 10 year rainfall event for the upper sub-catchments, we found just over a 10% reduction in peak flows and 3 3/4 hour time increase in the time delay to the peak. And then we've got a lot of ecosystem service benefits, which can be seen here by the lovely wheels that were created as part of the Working with Natural Processes Evidence Directory. Oh no!
I'm not quite sure what's happened there. We lost Jess. Give her a second to log back in. It wasn't too drastic. Yeah, I can see there's quite a lot of questions coming on the chat, and I can see that some. Oh, is that you again, Jess?
I'm just looking.
Look. Yeah, I can see that some of them have been answered as well. I was going to suggest that the person who's answered them could maybe come on if we can't get Jess back.
Okay, that was it.
Great.
That was it.
You're okay, Jess. It sounded drastic.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yes, that pretty much sums it up. So the report is available to download now, and that's the website you can get it from. The report itself is pretty long because we've got lots of appendices with the technical reports in and the opportunity maps. Which is why it was much easier to upload it to a website than to send it out in emails. But everyone's free to use that. But again, if anybody does use it, it'd be really useful to know about it. So yes, feel free to start with the questions.
Great, thanks very much, Jess. And thanks for coming back, because I was getting a bit worried that I was going to be left here on my own. Yeah, yes, we've had lots of questions, and people did. A number were submitted in advance, so we'll cover a mix of those and the ones in the chat. And just to say, Jess has kindly agreed to answer any questions we don't have time to go through now afterwards, and so we'll put a written responses on the website. There were a few questions, Jess, around engagement with stakeholders, partners, landowners, farmers, and community groups. Could you say something about the extent to which that's been carried out and how it's, what you found? Hello, Jess. Can't hear it. I can't hear anything, but I can see her.
Yeah, right. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
It's Chris McGregor. I work for Natural England, and I was involved with Jess on the project. It's okay. I mean, obviously, the key thrust was around the sort of modelling and trying to work out, if any of this would actually work in some of the key catchments. So there wasn't extensive kind of public consultation on options and that sort of thing. I think it was more about discussing it with some key landowners that were in areas where we thought there would be some sort of impact, and also other landowners that were already doing sort of NFM type interventions, not necessarily with with NFM being the key driver, perhaps, but where we might be able to model some of the benefits of that project for NFM. So there was quite a lot in the headwaters of the Hull Valley and the Lieben Cars project area in the middle reaches, and the landowners for that particular project own quite a lot of land in the middle section, and they're quite interested in developing this approach. So it was very much kind of an evidence gathering project overall, I think, rather than taking some potential options out and discussing them on the ground. We're kind of more at that stage now, and we're certainly looking to use the matrix when we're having initial discussions with landowners over countryside stewardship agreements, for example.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Are you happy to try and answer some other questions?
I'll do my best. I don't know if any of the Arram guys are on the call as well. They might be able to answer some of the more technical questions around sort of the work that was behind the outputs, if you see what I mean. I know there's quite a few questions on trees.
Yes, I was just going to say there were several around how.
Yeah, again, I think it depends, and I'm sort of happy for somebody else to jump in on this, but I think it depends really in some ways, and this is why the matrix is really useful, because you can weight, the benefits of the project that you're looking for. So where we've got a wet woodland creation project, and the primary driver for that is habitat creation, for example, we can then run that through. If you were doing it from a purely flood risk management point of view, there does seem to be some evidence that that conifers, for example, may be more effective. But of course, that wouldn't necessarily be a driver if you were looking for a sort of biodiversity-led approach. So I think it's probably a bit horses for courses, but the technicalities around species and age and planting layout or natural regen and all that sort of stuff, it's probably embedded in the report, and you know, you would need to tweak that depending on what your project aims were, I think.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, if any of the Arram team are on and wish to add, please turn your mic on, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
I am Gerard. It's Alex Nicholson here from Arram.
Hi.
Hi. It was just to say, it was Chris Skinner from the Energy and Environment Institute from Hull, who ran list flood for the that represented all the land cover change. We worked with Chris to develop the opportunity maps and used kind of GIS and spatial analysis to determine the appropriate locations for those, and then we used a combination of other data sets, including the crop map of England, Chrome, and slope data, proximity to flood zones and other runoff routes to help us score some of those interventions. I can go into that potentially in a little bit more detail a bit later on, but that was just to say I am here, but I wouldn't know too much about the specifics of how those are modelled. I could tell you why we chose certain places for them.
There was a question about what methods you use to value the ecosystem services. Could you say anything about that?
Sorry, what was that question?
The methods used to evaluate ecosystem services.
So this came directly from. I've got to get out of this room in 2 seconds. Sorry, I'm on a webinar with like 100 people. Okay, so I'm in my little baby's room, but I can move in a minute, so I'll mute myself and move. But the ecosystem services stuff, that was all from the evidence base, from the Working Natural Processes literature review. So you know those kind of wheels where there's like a pie chart where it says that for wet woodland you're going to deliver somewhere between 1 and 10 for air quality, or somewhere between 1 and 10 for aesthetics and health access, that sort of thing. They're all gathered around in that kind of pie chart. So what we did was we had the list of interventions that we were considering for Hull. I think the only one that was adapted and that wasn't in the evidence base was contour ploughing. So we based that on something like it was something like buffer strips, or it was or infield like tree strips or something. We adapted the contour ploughing anyway alongside the same kind of scoring metric. We gave them all the score they had from that, and then we applied a weighting as Jess said in the on that sort of dashboard. So you could basically say, I would like to give ecosystem services 30% of the total score. So whatever the ecosystem services value given by that intervention is then multiplied by 0.3 if it's 30%, and is added to the score. And that's added to the score for the assumed cost that we got from literature review, and some of the stuff from that came from Working with Natural Processes. The rest is just outlined in the report. Maintenance and available funding, those sorts of things, they all gave a score, and again you can change the weighting that you allocated to those from the overall matrix, and then the rest of the scoring process came from the how well those interventions delivered flood risk reduction from the list flood modelling results, and yeah, you could change the weighting either way. I'm going to mute myself, so I'll go into a different room and I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, thanks very much.
I've managed to get my sound back now as well, Gerard.
Yes, you're back. Great. Good. Welcome back.
This happened at the end and not cheering.
yeah, one question we received beforehand, which I think ties in with the answer that's just been given. It was around the historic environment and whether that was considered at all, and whether Historic England might be able to offer, might be able to contribute to the process. I don't know if that.
Yeah,
somebody from the organisation.
I'm hoping that John Trail is on the line because he's leading a project called Chalkshire, and that historical things are a big part of that as well. Is John on the line?
Chris again, Jess. I don't think John could make it, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I think the point with that one is that Historic England are part of the Chalkshire project, and also you know, have links into the catchment partnership. We've got layers within our systems, and there is extensive historic environment features, especially across the chalk on the Yorkshire Wolds, but also in the Hull Valley as well. It wasn't specifically kind of plugged in as a constraint as such. I think that would obviously come out in the mix in terms of an individual project, for example. But that is very much you know, in the mix, as well as other potential issues, like a negative impact on habitats, for example. So, you know, looking at a woodland and saying, right, well, we want to create a slowing the flow approach to wet that up in certain conditions, could well have a negative impact on the existing biodiversity. So I don't think the project wasn't sort of geared up to plug in all of those constraints. It was just to say, where might this work in the first instance from a flood risk point of view, and then that would then hopefully provide some information to then go on to a sort of specific project development phase.
Thanks very much. Another question. Actually, yes, we're running out of time, unfortunately. Are you planning to sort of refine the models and collect more information to sort of further prove them?
Hopefully, if this project progresses into implementation, which hopefully will happen in the next year or so, then if we could get some additional funding to be able to monitor as well, then we'd absolutely love to. It's just finding the funding opportunities to be able to cover the practical costs of implementing it, and then the time and the money of monitoring.
Okay, thank you. Another question was around negative impacts. Did you consider those on, for example, on properties in the floodplain as a result of implementing NFM measures?
Yeah, we certainly did try to, and if Alex is back, he might be able to explain how we kind of tried to take that into account when we programmed the evaluation matrix as well. But the flood depth maps that we created show flooded areas or protected areas with NFM, so that kind of gives us an insight as well. But it's more based on local knowledge of the area, I'd probably say, rather than the opportunity maps or the other matrix that could tell us the negative effects. But again, we need far more research into monitoring NFM in lowland areas, and especially areas which are groundwater dominated as well, to be able to kind of answer that any better, I think.
Okay, thanks, Jess. I think we'll have to draw to a close now. As I said earlier, Jess has kindly offered to answer the questions we haven't had time for, and we'll post those on the website. And somebody's also asked if we can put the chat up, because there's some good, interesting discussion going on there. So yes, we'll do that as well. So if I just draw us to a conclusion now. So yes, and if you have any further thoughts, please do email us. There's the, oh, go back to the beginning. Yeah, if you have any, do email us on the NFM email address there. It's there on the slide and also available on our website. We'll post a recording of this webinar on the website as well. So if people haven't been able to attend, your colleagues, for example, please let them know about that. The next webinar is on the 16th of July, and it's actually one of the three projects, about one of the three projects making up the research program. So it's the Protect NFM project, and so we've got Professor Tim Allott and Dr. Emma Shuttleworth from the University of Manchester, and they'll be talking about peatland catchments and natural flood management. So if you're interested in that, please, I suggest you sign up soon, because the last three webinars, including this one, have been sold out. If you do want to be kept in touch about future webinars and other matters related to the research, please sign up for our newsletter, and you can do that on our website as well. So thanks very much again to Jess and her colleagues who stepped in. Clearly it really is a team effort, this piece of work, and I hope you can join us again for the next webinar. Okay, bye then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.